Finally here, lads, championship time. 3 All-Ireland contenders out this weekend. We have Kerry, Mayo and Donegal. We're going to talk about them. We're back as well. Ger, we're in studio. You wore shorts. Hello to all our YouTube viewers. I never told you we were going back on YouTube.
No, I would have worn me good shorts. I've only my normal shorts on today, but I would have worn me fancy ones, Looks great, yeah.
Brendan, with this weekend, right, we're going to have to enjoy this. We're back in championship. We're back in studio. This weekend, 7 teams go out. The following weekend, 7 teams go out. The following weekend, 5 teams goes out. We're just going to have to sit back and enjoy championship football because I don't want to start on a downer. It's not going to last very long.
No, exactly, Willie. And I suppose the only downer is about the crowd. You remember back those days of knockout. We're a wee bit grey-haired enough. We can't see mine, a bit of Vaseline over there, but we remember back those knockout days, Willie, when the championship was cut and thrust and you were out. But I think the crowd probably made that, Willie, along with the aspect of just knockout championship. So I think as much as it's going to be very enjoyable, I think if you look at the grounds, particularly Park Esther, I was up there at a couple of down the Armagh games there recently. They were absolutely top class games, and neither team really were Ulster contenders, but the atmosphere in there was unbelievable, and it's a pity that won't be there now on Sunday, but still, I suppose the same rules apply. You lose, you're out.
Well, that's the big thing. You lose, you're out is the big thing. For me, it was more understandable last November, December. I understood it. It's a bit more frustrating in the summer, Ger, where, teams have trained, like you're over Carlow, everything's geared up. And, even this year, if you win one and lose the next week, you're still out within a week, 2 games. Whereas years ago, if you had a knockout championship, if you won your first one, there'd be a 3-week break before your next one. So you're in the championship for a month. Do you know that kind of?
Yeah, no, it is a pity. It's probably again another missed opportunity, I would say, from the GAA not to have some sort of backdoor. And talking to one of the lads down in Carlow, he made a fair suggestion that even if it was at provincial final level, that there's a backdoor opportunity there. Like, I think whether they still do that at minor level, they used to do that when I was playing minor, that if you got to your provincial final and you lost, you get another go. But I think there is time, there is space there to throw in at least one additional opportunity to give guys a chance to get 2 meaningful championship games, But,
it's just, it does make it that little bit more frustrating in the summer. But you're too young to have worried about knockout football. Me and Brendan aren't. I played knockout in 1998. Thankfully, we won our first game and got knocked out the next one. So, like I said, we're in the championship for a month, which didn't seem too bad. I was looking up your history, Brendan. 1998 Ulster final, you lost it. Joe Brawley blew a few kisses. All those kind of things. A heartbreaking loss, losing at the last minute. You went out in the championship in 1999, and you're knocked out of championship football on June the 6th.
Yeah, plonker. Well, do you know the only thing about that? And funny, when I was looking into this game at the weekend too, was the club aspect to that, which we obviously completely crushed for years. It's finally getting its proper standing in terms of the year and in the calendar. But, the club we had there, Dunans, was good at the time. We were always in about the county finals. I think I was involved in 11 of them in the time there. So as much as the county thing was massive then, it kind of felt like if you were good enough to go on a run, you did. And if you weren't, you weren't, which is another aspect of it, Billy, because sometimes lads surely can go through, might win an odd backdoor game, but, where are they going in terms of the championship?
Yeah.
So I think in many ways, if you're beat, you kind of had to assess that and come back with something fresh, and you had a whole year's planning to do that around the National League and that. So there was plenty of arguments for and against that, but I just think when football started to go up and up in terms of interest, and the GAA, started to redevelop stadiums and TV, and everything started to get involved in it, they certainly knew that one game wasn't enough in championship, and obviously you had the back door, the qualifiers. And if you remember the early days of the back door, nobody went to the games. It was quite strange. There was a lot of games nobody went to. Nobody could understand what was happening. There was much less at it than the National League game, let's say. So eventually then people started to get behind their teams and realise teams could go on a run. And I think we've seen massive crowds in after the first couple of years, and there's real excitement around it. I think for a team like Donegal, I suppose, we often came up short in Ulster. We were more played like a southern team. And I think in the first, I remember seeing a stat the first 5 or 6 years, the back door, Donegal won more games than anybody else in the back door. So it just showed where our football kind of lay at the time. We preferred coming down to the softies in the south.
Yeah, nobody, nobody went to the games at the start. Nobody went training before the meter, Ger, because when if we got knocked out, the whole thing was so kind of new. You're like, you'd be lucky to get everyone to training the following week because you're used to just losing and you're out of the championship. But that's it. But that's a good point Brendan makes. Like a run in the qualifiers for Carlow, for example, you're not going anywhere. You're just trying to, get a few wins. And I suppose getting those few wins is much better when your supporters going. I'm wondering what a run in the qualifiers would mean anyways now.
No, there's probably a couple of things there for me. I think where there's no backdoor opportunity and you have an open draw in the provincial championships, and with Ulster being so competitive, and the example you gave of Brendan back in 99, 98, if two of your likely All-Ireland semi-finalists or potential finalists are drawn against each other in the first round of Ulster, or Cork and Kerry are drawn against each other in the first round of a Munster, and probably Dublin and Meath, when Meath were still going well back then, one of a potential All-Ireland finalist, semi-finalist, is going to be knocked out. And I think those teams can have a bad day, and to give those teams, which was great about the qualifiers, to give those particular teams an opportunity to probably sort of stuff out. The likes of the Division 3 and 4 teams, I think we need another competition. Whether it is that Tailteann Cup or whether the 3 tiers of football, I think that would be more achievable for teams that are playing in the lower divisions, with some sort of option of progressing into, say, the All-Ireland Sam Maguire series if they were to win their tier 2 or tier 3 competition. And then the third thing, from again playing with St. Vincent's, I know you had it in your club notes or in your notes sent out earlier, but we played knockout with St. Vincent's in Dublin for probably about 18 years senior with the club, so 8 or 9 of those years were straight knockout, and we never got a brutal draw, and we got Ballybowden, I think, the second round, and that was probably the toughest earliest draw we ever got. But Castleknock, when they were up and coming, drew against St. Owen Rew, Oliver Plunkett's an awful lot, and Plunkett's also drew against Kilmacud Crokes for a number of years. And those 3 teams, certainly Plunkett's and Crokes at that time, were potential Dublin champions or finalists. One of those teams was gone in the first round.
Yeah.
And no, it added huge excitement to the game. And even as a player, as we've all gone into those knockout games, it is something different when you're in the car going to the county grounds when you know that it's do or die here. It's an extra buzz, which is part about the enjoyment of actually playing.
It's what it's all
games.
about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
the knockout and the supporters part of it. Since you called us softies, Brendan, I'm going to throw this one to you. The kind of Ulster Hardman Championship. The bench press,
which
the bench.
We were too soft for one. I was beginning to dig it myself.
Well, come here, Mickey Graham. I'm only joking with you. Mickey Graham was talking about Ulster football, right? And he says if you're looking at the league and looking at the form guide, you would probably say that Dublin and Kerry seem to be pushing on again, and Ulster football is that bit behind. You would hope it wasn't the case, but on the evidence of what we've seen so far, there has to be a link. Cavan Ulster champions in Division 4, Tyrone getting destroyed by Kerry. Dublin pretty much destroying Donegal, whether you like the tactics or not. They were at their ease. Like, is this a case that Ulster football, after being so strong for so long, since the start of the 90s, could be on the slide?
Well, it's a deep one. I think is it a question that Dublin have just raised the bar so high, and Kerry, being the former kings of football, are trying to respond, and they're just putting absolutely everything into that, and they're realising that they have to up their game substantially. And if you look where Kerry outside of last year in terms of that defeat to Cork, which was a shock, they're so far ahead of everybody in Munster, and Dublin are so far ahead of everybody in Leinster that they've just. Are we looking at 2 squads that I think in the modern times, the modern football, in terms of squads ability, backing, everything that goes into those teams is so close to professionalism. Are the Ulster teams at that level? They're certainly not squad-wise at that level, and I don't think they have the necessary backup of everything that those 2 counties are. I think they operate at a different level, and I think Mayo probably are close behind that in terms of they seem to be able to have huge resources in terms of financial backing too as well. Now I'm not saying that's a singular reason, but I just think that if you look at Ulster, you're right, there's like a chasing pack there. I think Donegal, Monaghan, Tyrone and now Armagh have stepped up as well. that's why the Ulster Championship for me is probably more interesting than All Ireland itself, because there's so many teams that have a cut at each other in it, and teams seem to be getting their house in order. You even look at Derry coming up, our Antrim coming up as well. As I say, Down are out of sorts a bit, and so the Cavan relegation was very surprising. So I think all those sides now are certainly playing catch up to two teams that are seemingly pulling away from everybody else, Willie. And you think about particularly Croke Park in that too, and how good Dublin are there, and how used to Kerry are there as well. They're both grounds that they just, I think, come to their best in. And I think Ulster teams coming out of Ulster having shots and cuts at each other, it's just such a different football then when they get to Croke Park. And you've seen, Willie, you've highlighted many times about tactics, about coming up short and how you're going to beat the like of the Dubs. And I think for until an Ulster team takes a big scalp, I certainly think you'd say you're correct. They're in a chasing pack.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem with Tyrone and Donegal, is taking those big scalps, which are Kerry, Dublin and Mayo. There's one thing always about the Ulster football, and maybe it's just because what we remember in the 90s and the 2000s, and like, it is competitive. But I look at the game of the weekend this weekend, Ger, and I think, down Donegal looks like that's the game of the weekend. But why is Kerry and Clare? Like, Kerry are better than Donegal and Clare are better than Down. Why do we always think? I don't know. Maybe because they're closer matches and there's the fear that Kerry might blow Clare away. But like, if Donegal are All Ireland contenders, Down are a lower Division 2 team. Should we not be thinking Down are going to, or Donegal are going to blow Down away the same way Kerry are going to blow Clare away?
It's probably, we've been conditioned to associate with Clare with hurling and probably consider them to be more of a hurling county than they are football. And obviously the proof was in the pudding with what they've won on the hurling side of things and playing in the top division. But at the same time, the Clare footballers have been consistently knocking around Division 2. They've looked to get promoted on a couple of occasions over the last number of years, but have fell short, and they're in the right division for them because they mightn't have. They've very strong 2022 players in Clare. The back end of the panel probably wouldn't get into most Division 1 to county squads.
They wouldn't be good enough for Division 1.
They wouldn't be good enough, and that's where you need a bit of depth.
Do we slightly overrate these Ulster matches?
Well, for me, what's enjoyable, what I look forward to in the Ulster Championship and nearly the mini Ulster Championship, the way the divisions were regionalised for the league this year, was teams are so close to one another. There's so many rivalries that they've built up with one another over numerous years, and that regardless, I can only imagine, and Brendan will know more from playing in the Ulster Championship, but regardless of tactics and how you want to play, if there's again, I've probably used the phrase, a healthy bit of hatred for your opponents, that does creep into your psyche and it creeps into the team, and sometimes tactics go out the window and it's a bit of a dogfight.
We're good at that in Ulster, Ger.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah. And that's why when we played Monaghan in loads of challenges under Pat Gilroy in the early years, and because they were tough digging matches a lot of the time, and but I'd say we played each other about 3 or 4 times a season in challenge games for a number of years, because it was perceived that we were too soft, and same way that Brendan was saying in his early years, they were probably too soft, that they weren't hardened enough for the 6 counties type of football. But for me, I'd say the attention is given to the Ulster Championship and those matches, even though I think Donegal should be hockeying down. But we'll know more in a couple of days. But generally speaking, they are far more competitive, and again ties in with what Brendan's saying. It's a more hotly contested championship than the All Ireland series at the moment.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Brendan. Peter Keane has been talking about Kerry's defence, because every year, Brendan, we talk about Kerry's defence, and you say, their defence isn't good enough, and I don't go along with that. Like, I mean, they've played Dublin in 2 All-Ireland finals 2 years ago, and they held Dublin to 116, and that's the same as what Mayo held Dublin with too, and Mayo are seen as having a brilliant defence. Like, I'm just using that as an example. So they're back at it this year again, criticising Kerry's defence based on the 4 goals they conceded against Dublin. You'll say fair enough. And I think Peter Keane was responding back to the Gooch, who was saying they don't communicate enough on the field. And Peter Keane has come back. He says, we played Galway, we conceded 11 scores. We only conceded 1-3 against Dublin in the second half. We played Roscommon, we conceded 1-12, which is 13 scores. The most scores we conceded was against Tyrone, 1-14, which is 15 scores. Which, like, I mean, you're still saying if you were going out with a team Kerry have and you're conceding 114, they'd probably take that, you know? Like, I mean, do we think we overdo the Kerry defence isn't good enough kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I'd say possibly it's coming. I mean, the sounds of things, Tommy Griffin's coaching the backs now, and Morris Fitz is coaching the forwards. And if you look at Tony Buckley not being replaced, you just think that Peter Keane was happy enough that the structure's in place. He was happy enough going into this season. He has put a bit of pressure on himself by doing that. He's in his third year. Obviously, they had that shock defeat last year, and people are saying they got their tactics wrong. They were too defensive. So they've really started blowing teams away, I think, this year, and really flexing their muscles. So I think it's that counterbalance. They don't seem as locked-tight as maybe Dublin do, but I don't think they need to play that way, you know. I think their strength is outscoring teams. So what Keane has quoted there in terms of scores for, you're always going to think Kerry are going to score more than that. It's just interesting that they haven't taken in a coach, So he must be happy enough in his mind that what they have, they're ready for a big attack this year. And I just think, with Clare, Collins has done well there. He seems to have broken the kind of mantra about, Clare football and that there's people from the hurling side that have committed. And it's hateful when you have to have that ding-dong between hurling and football. But he certainly has galvanised Clare. They've stuck with Kerry the last couple of games they've played. I gave them a match right up to maybe 15 minutes or so. So you're right. That is a potential. I mean, is there a shock this weekend somewhere? You're right. Everybody's writing off Clare completely, and I think they'll be ready for a battle there as much as Donegal. I just think the difference, as you were saying there, Jared, that if you look at the history of some of those counties, you see they've had unbelievable periods of time of brilliant football, and I think that's why people in Down still look back to that. And I think if you look what happened in Armagh in terms of what McGeeney's done there, players have stuck with him, and it's taken some time for Armagh to come back competitive. And Down have the same ingredients, at the same kind of level of club football. I mean, you look at Kilcoo and the brilliance that they have. So there's a real pedigree in Down, but until they commit to the county, and I think that's a huge aspect. If you look at different counties, on top of everything else, as we just spoke about, resources and the talent pool in that, the players in Down aren't committed. I mean, good few Kilcoo players stepped away. The Johnson brothers, Ward, stepped away this year, and maybe they're looking at the whole championship thinking, right, we have four league games or 3-4 league games, and we're going into a championship which we can't win. And Kilcoo obviously are thinking there's going to be a great championship ahead from them. They're going to look to one Down and one Ulster. So that's not happening in other counties, and I think that's another huge handicap to a team like Down going into this. And every other team like that, Clare's the same. If you look at the battle with hurling, they don't have the full talent pool that they should have. So that's what just makes it so difficult to catch up to these superpowers like Kerry.
Well, it is, like, I mean, and everybody talks about that, and Paddy Tally's been talking this week about not having players committed, like the Johnson brothers, like you're talking about, Brennan. Then you look at Dublin, and they've done it Jack McCaffrey and Paul Mannion. So I'll see your two Johnson brothers, and I'll raise you. Like, I think every county is. I do accept that the big counties, Jesus, if you have a chance of winning an All-Ireland, you'll commit more. Yeah. But down through the years with every county, that's always been the way.
Yeah, it is a mindset, and I can fully appreciate what Brendan's talking about, where a senior inter-county player is a club man first and foremost, and what good club managers do with their players who are representing the club or the county, they still get inside their heads and they make sure that they're committing as much as they can to the club as well. And it's very, very difficult probably to serve two masters. And I'd say what Paddy Tally is getting at, and I know Paddy through the colleges, and he's done great things with St Mary's, winning the Sigerson a few years ago. A guy has to just give everything to the one cause and the one purpose, and he has to think like an elite player away from the field. And whether he likes it or not, the club is a poor relation when you're an inter-county player, although you do have to show your face and commit when the club championship is up and running. So it's a tough challenge for a talented club man and inter-county guy to handle, and equally it's quite difficult for a decent county manager, particularly when Brendan talks about the raw ingredients that are available to Down and the raw ingredients that are available to Armagh. it's taken McGean. I think he's in his 6th or 7th year now, and in fairness, he has to mould him really, really well. And that's a big task that Paddy Tally has, and probably the off season when the club is finished this year, a lot of those down players probably have to commit very, very quickly to get back to a level of conditioning that is required to progress through the ranks, So it's tough trying to serve all those masters.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Come here, before we get into the matches, I was interested to read Stevie MacDonald. He had a piece in the Irish News, Brendan, and he was talking about, my job was made easier when certain players like Aidan O'Rourke, Kieran McGeeney, Paul McGrain, John McEntee had the ball. I always knew they were definitely going to deliver it, right? And it just kind of made me laugh, because I was thinking back when I was playing with Laois, and like there's certain lads you just wouldn't run, because you just know they're going to put the head down and they're going to solo it. And then you have other players that if they get on the ball, I'm coming alive, this is coming in. And I don't know, you would imagine you have a game plan where you kind of know it's one or the other. I'd imagine you're playing in the full forward line with Donegal and you were a predominantly hand passing team. Who are you making the run? Who has the ball when you're making the run?
I usually hung about around the 13 for the handy free, Willie, you know yourself. But no, listen, I know, and unfortunately, I know them passes all too well, because I was usually at the other end of the pitch watching them get into Stevie Mac, and what a player he was, by the way, and top man as well. But Armagh had that system at the time where they opened up space in the crossfield pass, and you're right, sometimes you get a bit of telepathy with certain players out the pitch where they will release early, and it's something that split second is just the making of it. And you're right, there are certain players in your team will carry the ball, and certain players would kick pass it, but it was just up to the flow of the game. And that I don't think we were necessarily an overly hand passing team. I think that came out of real kind of back in the 92 days. I think certain different managers were in all at different styles, I think the one style we didn't get was rigid defence, which, as much as I hated, we could have done with a bit of it at the time, and that all changed, of course, when Jimmy Tunes came in.
Well, it definitely did. But it's interesting that two of the good kick passers that he mentions there on the half back line.
Yeah.
Right? So you have Aidan O'Rourke and Kieran McGeeney. And I was looking down through all the top teams, right? So you have Dublin's kick passers. Who are Dublin's kick passers? Fenton, Scully, Howard. Is McDade Small or Johnny Cooper known for kick passes? They're not. Where I remember back in the day, you would have, you're definitely looking for the kick pass. You look at Kerry, and they have more in the midfield who maybe kicks too much. We've spoke about that. Paddy Clifford, Geaney, Moynihan will drop out looking for the kick pass. Who would their half back line? Paul Murphy, White, Crowley, not known for their kick pass. And is that something that's Mayo? None of Mayo's defenders are known for kick pass, and they're a running team. Maybe Durkin can kick pass it, but Mayo's kick passes are from midfield up. Is having good kick passers on your half back line, and you're there because you're a good kick passer, that's gone, is it?
It's I suppose the manager has to look at what he has available to him, and then he probably has to design the way he's playing in some ways based on those particular skill sets that those lads have. I said, Brendan, obviously up forward, you're going to make harder runs when a certain guy has the ball, because he's going to be looking, have his head up and looking to release it nice and early. Whereas other guys, they're just going to take a couple of touches, they're going to pass it left or pass it right. But it comes down to knowing as a player, Wooly, what you're capable of doing, what your range is. And some guys kick passing range is a 40-50 metre pass, and other guys kick passing range is 15-20 metres, and it's probably playing the percentages within that range to be able to execute what you're able to do. I was flicking at watching the 2011 final when we played Kerry. I was watching over the weekend for something else. As the first time actually watching the first half, the amount of balls we kicked away in the first half, we were brutal actually.
Even that recent, but that was the game back then.
That was the game, but Kerry were far superior than us in that particular half. But we were looking, our game plan at that time was to kick the ball into the lads and let them kind of battle for it, give them a 60-40, Whereas now the way the game is, it's 100% passes more often than not. So players are probably being assessed at the end of a match. They're getting the statistics. Their tackle count is up, their possession count is up, what came off their possessions. And some fellas get excited by, I had 30 possessions and I didn't give the ball away once, but you only passed the ball 5 yards to the left or 5 yards to the right, which is, I think, happened to Dublin with Kieran Kilkenny. maybe midway during Jim Gavin's career with the lads, where his natural inclination to attack and take guys on was curbed because he was nearly overcoached. And I know I've talked about that. We can curb guys' creativity.
He had 55 possessions and he was being celebrated it. And I was pulling my hair out on the Sunday game. I was like, this is incredible. I was like, what's he doing with that?
What comes of it, like, you know, which is important. But I look at it, for me, it's a very simple game. Get the ball up to your creative forward as quick as possible, and if you can do it with the boot, perfect. If you can't and you need to work it through the hands, well that's what you do. But the kick pass is what people want to see, like, you know.
I think so. And then I was looking through the Donegal team, Brendan. Like, there's literally no player on the Donegal team until the half forward line that you know is known for a kick pass.
Yeah, I'm sensing wee digs coming here about Donegal from you consistently. I mean, you're going to have another one of these WhatsApp rammies where I'll allow you to put this one up. But Willie, no, listen, you're talking about half backs there and half forward. What actually does that mean anymore? You know,
it's gone. Yeah.
Everybody's kind of, you know, everybody's in the one zone. I find that the kick pass that I've noticed coming up, and as much as this year, and it's happened a lot in the league, is that kick pass where a team turns over the ball or has the ball round about their 30-yard line, their own 30-yard line, and they release somebody out the wings that's breaking into space against all the groups of players that's in there. And I've noticed that's very effective, because when that man gets it, he's coming up then, maybe passing halfway line. He's got a massive parallel pitch to hit the ball in, and then you've got that ability you're on with the old Armagh cross-feed pass, which I think is a huge thing for teams going forward. But yeah, I think, well, obviously, if Murphy's in there, kick passing, like Langan's well capable of it.
McNeilish, Thompson, they have a lot of good kick passers, but they're all up at that end of the field.
It just depends again where the motion of the team is. You know, let's be honest with you, it's still keep ball first. Still, that's the tactic. As much as we'd love to see kind of Currafin example of just turn kick. I mean, it looks brilliant. I mean, I've never seen anybody else do it as good as them. But that would be the way I think teams would like to play. But just go back to what Jer's saying. Certain players just don't have the ability to do that, either in range or the ability to get their head up to pick out that pass. So you'll see it, the play gets linked when the right players get on the ball. And that's why I think you see so much at times go through the likes of Michael Murphy for Donegal in particular.
Right. Has that always been the way, Ger? Like, I mean, I do remember players just putting the head down, like, and they're frustrating players, and they've always been, you know, part of the game. They'd run an awful lot. Are there just a lot less kick passers now than there used to be?
I'd say there's probably a lot less kick passers now than there used to be, and
capable of kick passes. Or is any inter-county player capable of it? They're just not being told to do it.
Well, there's probably two things, and the primary reason that we're not seeing as many natural kick passers is that, you know, I've seen this even in my own club, but in other clubs that would use UCD's facilities, and I'm sometimes watching over the fence and watching under 14s or 15s being coached by lads who are committed parents who are doing the best, and some of the stuff they're saying is, I'm like, that's way off. And
like what?
Keep the ball, pass it back, pass it to Johnny, give and go, keep it simple, which is important. But as opposed to young lads, here, take your man on, have a go, go past them, try the crossfield ball, express yourself, enjoy striking the ball off the outside of your boot and catching it well, like if you hit a good sliotar playing hurling. Not that I'm known for hurling, but that feeling of satisfaction you get when you've caught the ball nice, or you've caught a good ball above your head nice, there's a kick you get out with, you know. So probably guys are being coached in a different way based on what Johnny and Mickey and Paddy are seeing in the clubhouse bar when they're watching Dublin or Donegal or whoever's playing on television, and they nearly try to mirror what the top guys are doing. But it'll come again, like it'll ebb and flow, like, you know, just the nature of the world. But so that's probably what's happened. That it's getting into guys' heads far too young not to be giving the ball away or to be taking a bit of a chance, you know. So.
Well, that's the thing, Brennan. I don't know if I was over an underage team, Brendan, passing the ball backwards would be banned, and I would just have that in my team. If they're under 12, you turn around and give it back to a fella behind you, I don't want to know about you. Let's go for it, like the way Mayo play, and that's one that jumps. I keep talking about Mayo in that regard, that they're always going straight ahead. Geez, I don't want to use Donegal as an example now of a team that doesn't do that, Brendan, or you'll eat me. But like, I mean, the sideways stuff, that's not what you want to be telling children to do.
No, certainly will. I think any team would be lucky to have you in charge. Under 12s is about your limit, I think, in terms of what you know about the game. But stop there. But,
he's getting it back now.
Well, I've heard some horror stories about underage stuff like that there too. I mean, it's bad enough at men's senior level, making so many players be robotic. Now, I know there are certain players, as I said, that are the players that open things up in the town. But I always think everybody should have a go within reason. You hear about players not being allowed to shoot. I heard about a local club down the road here from me, that the manager, there was only 2 players that were allowed to shoot. Honestly, they were like, when you get inside the 30, you had to give it to these players. And this was a senior. It wasn't a senior team, but it was a men's team. But yeah, I've heard of blitzes and that, and players playing all out blanket defence and that, and it's absolutely shocking. I don't know where all this comes from. It's just, I suppose, the volunteers we have out there. We can't expect everybody to be perfect, but going back to the discussion me and you had before, really, there's a way we have to, I think, play the game within reason, and certainly for underage up, be having a go. Do you remember that video came out, that schools game there up the north, where the team just kept the ball
2-1 or something and finished,
It was absolutely shocking. So, for putting that in their young players, it's a real crime against the game. So. And as Jerry was saying, I think that the flow is coming round. The skills of the game is coming back up, and I think that's what the young lads are then are going to look up to see. So I just get a bit of a fear, really, that it's taken a lot longer to filter through at club level than it is at county level, and I still see some horror shows, but maybe that's more up here in Donegal.
Well, that's obviously the thing, Jerry. Like, I mean, you have volunteers who are over underage teams and their parents, and I don't blame them for seeing how the game's being played on the Sunday and then telling the children, because they probably don't know any better.
They're doing their best. Exactly, and they're doing their best, and again, maybe this is where maybe Dublin have been able to get their house in order a good few years ago, and where they've gotten solid club GPOs who are coaching the parents.
They're telling the parents, that's give them the basics.
Yeah, it's give them the basics, and the parent who's bringing their kid up to the club for the first time but grew up playing soccer or no sport, and all of a sudden here we need bodies. You get involved, mind those young lads over there. Yeah, and so those guys certainly in a lot of the Dublin clubs are definitely being coached. So coaching the coaches is a big part for it, and. But yeah, you can't fault their efforts, those kind of people. But certainly my role, I'm at a lot of games and sessions, and you hear all sorts of funny things, and that would be way off. But anyway,
Go on.
Oh no, well, just along the lines of coaching, just kind of managers, and the old. Sometimes you hear the old lad in the stands still saying, let it in, and you could be in there being marked by 3 lads, and no, don't let it in on that occasion, because you'll get bashed. But
you don't hear let it in at matches anymore.
No, it's gone now, isn't it?
Jesus, it's gone now.
We need to get that back, do we? Yeah.
There's no matches. There's no one at the matches, I suppose. There's no let it in. Even the old timers have given up on it, have they?
Yeah. Poor old Dibbles.
Because I remember in 2011, I've mentioned this to you in the show before, when you played Donegal, and I specifically remember you. I was on Hill 16 for that, and you continually kicked the ball in, but you'd never seen anything like this before, and you wanted to get into Bernard. That was your game plan, and I was like, let it in. It's not the smartest thing to do that day.
We sorted it out at half time, in fairness, and I think was it Bernard and Dermot Connolly and Kev McMahon came in and was give the ball to the lads, and let the lads run at them, and that was what got us over the line just about.
Who came up with that?
Pat in half time, Well, you Pat there, Mickey Whelan was there. It was something we actually hadn't practiced, but we figured it would have been defensive-ish. But who was the full forward? You'd McFadden full forward. He was
Colin
brilliant.
McFadden was on his own just.
He was on his own.
I know. See at the time, they leave one up at the time. People were like, "What the hell's going on now?" You might even see one up, but Donegal. That was the first game I was ever at that was booed. At Croker, it was the weirdest game ever. And listen, that season was funny. In respect to Dublin, you look at McGuinness's 4 years, his tenure there. Like as you said there, Pat you come in. I know you mightn't have been expecting it to be that ultra, but you did deal with it.
Yeah.
In some way. If you look at 2012, then everybody got sucked into Donegal's pattern of play, And listen, don't get me wrong, Donegal were brilliant. Fitness went up through the roof tactically. I think injury free. Everything just seemed to click. But what also clicked with them was the ineptitude for me of the managers that they played. That just said, right, we're going to play our own game. And as you see, you play your own game against a counter-attacking team, and you're going to be in trouble. I just couldn't believe some of the decisions tactically in 2012, and Donegal went right through. And if you look at it, then they obviously had 2013 off, and 2014 then teams like Kerry, then I suppose in the All-Ireland final, went tactically very like Donegal. And once a team, I think top teams set up similar, it's down to the small margins, and Kerry just happened to come out on top that day. And I think that's what we've seen over the years. And tactics have ground to a halt in terms of it being low scoring and terrible teams. I said, well, you may as well start to attack each other, and at least then the top team's going to come out in terms of scoring. So thankfully the game has changed that way around. But there was a few dark days, but you come out on top that one at least.
The one big thing you did back then was you left your backs in their positions. You didn't get sucked into the counter attack with Donegal. But it's an interesting thing what Brennan says that I heard the booing that day, and I'd never seen anything like it. I was like, this is just. I didn't know whether it was interesting or whether it was an abomination. I was kind of in shock, as in I'd never seen anything that extreme before. And now me and Brendan were having a debate last week. We have the best team in the country, putting all their players inside at least the 65, and it's perfectly normal. This is how accustomed we are 10 years later to that abomination, to the best team in the country being celebrated. Now, Dublin don't head off back and wait for you there. There are subtle differences, but haven't we become so used to this?
Yeah, it's amazing how we do become accustomed to what's in front of us, and the herd mentality that exists in human nature, that everyone probably jumps on board and wants to be seen as a part of the same crew. But like in Dublin, and even I know we chatted briefly about Kerry earlier and their defence, like Kerry and Dublin, their forwards are only tracking back if they have to. If the old roving corner back doesn't go forward, well, the lads will tend to hold the position, and which is probably the difference between the likes of certainly Mayo, Dublin, Kerry in their defensive model, that they will only track back if up front if there's a need to track back, where the other stuff we're talking about with Donegal going back and some other teams, where it's systematically, like, if you lose the ball, run back from the opposition's 45 to your 45 and set up shop there and wait for them to come up to you,
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not throwing this to Brendan. No, you're not allowed to answer this, Brendan. We've been through all this before.
Go, it's your show, big guy. You call it. No problem.
Go on, what are you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, well, this comes back to championship, you see, and teams, counties wanting to win. You can park everything behind winning, particularly if you haven't been successful. Let's say Donegal's a perfect example of it. Hadn't won an Ulster since 92 or whatever, and we're just barren of even winning an Ulster and then going to Ireland. So no matter what the county does, everyone's going to be behind that, and every county's the same. But happened was in it, it's dulled down that bit, and because it's not a league format, if you look at other competitions, people just wouldn't have that if it was week in, week out. This goes back to knockout, and if your team wins ugly, your county's still going to accept that because you want to win. And this is the dilemma we've been in the GAA, and that's why we haven't left it, even though it got really bad, and we've got used to say tactics again. It's because it still comes down, and you said it to me, Dublin did that, but they've got 6 All-Irelands. So this is the 6 in a row. Sorry. So this is where it comes back to. Well, it comes back to the kind of nature of championship versus how much you want to entertain, and it's always going to come to win first, and that's why the tactics kind of suffocated it. But as we've been saying, it is getting better. I think the games are still more enjoyable. I think the skills of the game, particularly forward play, has reached a level I've never seen before, and I think in those moments there's enough for us to get excited about, even though teams are still dropping, as you say, the full team inside the 45.
Yeah. And the question I throw out to you lads is like, if you have a group of players and in the very short term they have their limitations, parking the bus is makes sense, but are you developing them developing those guys to actually win in year 2 or year 3 or beyond that, you're probably not. So you might win the first round or 2 of your championship, but you'll get found out eventually by a team that's a bit more balanced offensively and defensively. So it's kind of it's a tough thing to. I'm only thinking of my own involvement, even with Carlo as well. It's far simpler and easier to bring guys back and to leave them there, and will it slow down better opponents or teams with a bigger pick? Of course it will, but over the course of the 70 or 80 minutes as it's going now, you're still going to get bet. So do you want to get bet playing something that is progressive and enjoyable? And the same way that Kerry are now doing now, that they're just going for it. Yeah, we might concede the odd goal or 2, albeit it's 4 against Dublin, but other than that, they've done quite well as you described. But we're going to back ourselves with our football ability, our attacking ability, and we're going to let the lads get them fit, get them healthy, get them enjoying their football, and let's see what happens. Let's take it to the opposition, and if we ship 1 or 2 goals in the back, fair enough. We're going to score more at the other end, But
yeah, it seems to be changing to that philosophy. We'll come back in part 2 and we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so like we said, we're going to start with Down versus Donegal in Esler Park at the weekend. And Declan Bonner has been talking before this one. And he says it's one of those things on the training ground. You're always looking for your attack and how you can improve that. But at the same time, it's about getting the balance. So we would have been working on both elements, and every other manager would be. From then we had to make sure we wouldn't be conceding 4 goals. And here's the thing, Brendan, I'll start with you. And I'm not always trying to be down on Donegal. I rate Donegal so highly. That's why they frustrate me a little bit. And for example, I can see Donegal going back to a more cagey game this weekend against Down. I can see them not blowing away Down like they should be really doing. For a bottom Division 2 level team, they should be blowing Down away, and I don't think they will blow Down away. You look at Kerry, they conceded the 4 goals against Dublin. Kerry didn't rip up the script. Kerry are sticking to what they think they're good at. Like, for example, Tadhg Morley allowed Con double back along the end line. I'm sure Kerry worked on that on a video session. Says, look, Tadhg, you have to stay goal side of your man. Like we spoke about on the show, stay goal side of him. That can't happen again. Like the other goal against Dublin from a big long ball from Scully. How's Paul Murphy left one-on-one with Conor Callaghan, who's brilliant in the air? Lads, how did that happen? Well, I swapped man with him. Why didn't you ask a midfielder to come back and help you when you found yourself in that? There's all these things that can get ironed out, and you won't iron them out unless you can make those mistakes for the championship. I don't think, and this is the point, maybe I'm a bit blue in the face saying it, or I'm overdoing it. Just because you concede 4 goals doesn't mean you rip up the script. You just coach the players to get better and not concede those same type of goals. You might concede another one, but then you iron that out, and then you get to a stage maybe in year 2, year 3, where very few goals are going to come against you that you haven't discussed.
Yeah, I think, are you reading into the Dublin performance? Or just after Monaghan?
No, I think the way Donegal have slightly changed since they conceded the 4 goals against Monaghan. And Bonner has commented on it a few times.
I think Donegal are basically playing the same a lot of the time. I think when you see a game opening up, as we spoke there earlier, there is that speed in the attack, which seems to be opening up maybe the opposite end of the pitch sometimes, and that's what we're seeing. As I say, we're also seeing a huge elevation in terms of point scoring. I mean, well, there's such a high percentage of scores going over now, and free kicks converted, etc. I think that's all leading to that. But Donegal are playing the same way by and large. I think after Monaghan against Armagh, they conceded 1 goal and didn't concede a lot of goal chances. But again, the spectre of Murphy, and Donegal is such a good team, and I don't like to go back to the Murphy scenario, but so much changes when he's on that middle of that pitch and conducting things for Donegal, just in different moments. He just seems to calm or set up or do something for Donegal, and I think that's actually been important, and I think it'll work well for Donegal coming in. The fact that they did, I think, against Dublin, there were so many players missing. They're probably missing 7 of the players, and they did revert into a very negative game, you're right. But all they wanted to avoid was the spanking that Tyrone got, and they just wanted to get through the game. And that was only 2 weeks ago going into this one. So I can't read into that too much, but I think you're right. I mean, you've got to stick to the tactics you have. I don't think Donegal have necessarily changed tactics. They've just managed what they see as an incoming season. So that's going into down, yeah, I think. But like you've said about Donegal taking on Dublin, Wally, and you're 100% right. There's only one way to beat Dublin in terms of you have to go at them at times, and you have to play a kick and running game. You can't sit and try and counter-attack them, because they'll do it to you and they'll be better at it. And this is the same for Paddy Tally and Down. They obviously two very poor performances against Mayo and Meath, which is the two teams you'd say would be closest to Donegal in terms of that division. They beat Westmeath, and of course they had the playoff against Laois that they won. They had 2-19 in it, so they had a positive finish, really. But the worry for them would be that when they come up against Mayo and Meath, they were well off it. So what is their tactics going into the game more so than Donegal? Because I think Donegal can play it anyway. If Down do sit and try, and they have got great speed, if they do try and counter-attack Donegal and sit too deep, they'll invite Donegal on, and with Donegal's full complement back, they will get picked off. So Down's going to go into something new into this game to upset the balance. And I think the pitch, is very tight up there, Park Esther. Same as Armagh last year when they lost to Cavan. I think Cavan physically got about Donegal, which I think they were capable of doing. And we're still shocked about Cavan go down into Division 4. It's unbelievable, but they did get about Donegal, and there was a lot of factors I think led into that. But certainly, if that game maybe was at a Clonus or at a larger pitch, I think the space would have suited Donegal a bit more. So that's maybe something they'll look at going into the game. But they are going to have to come up with something new to upset Donegal. But I think Donegal played very professionally, Willie. And if you believe, just a quote from Conor Glass there after they beat Offaly in the league there, they go up to Division 2, that now we're concentrating on Donegal. So if you believe him, Donegal is going to win the game.
We've got a tip off Conor Glass before I even ask you. Yeah, Brennan mentioned Michael Murphy there. He does conduct things around midfield, but surely after being out for a month with a hamstring injury, we'll see him spend an awful lot more time, Jerry, in at 14, you'd imagine.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you there. It's regardless of how fit you are and how wonderful a player you are. Coming back into your first game back as a senior championship match, it'll look at the extra bit of intensity that does come with knockout football would be huge. And Michael's been around the block long enough, and I would imagine that Bonner will nearly leave it to him to call it himself, to probably come in and out just to get his bit of a breather inside. But obviously he'd be a danger man in there too, and then come out then if he has to pick up a lot of ball. But I've always loved Michael Murphy when he's inside, because he terrorises full back lines because he's so strong in the air. And I actually think Donegal can develop a lot of their players, a lot of athleticism in the middle, in their middle eight. I'd nearly leave Michael in there for most of the game and just let the thing into him, and I think he'll do untold damage,
Yeah, if they only had a few kick passers.
Yeah, can't pass it.
You're right, Brennan. Down aren't the biggest team in the world, and they're missing their midfielder, Johnny Flynn, who's a huge loss to them. They'll have Ryan McAvoy from Kilcoo. He's one of the only lads from Kilcoo on it. He's only 18. And Caelan Mooney. We know Caelan Mooney, he's plays half-back, midfield, centre forward, wing forward, wherever. He's got blistering pace. I saw Colin O'Rourke on the Sunday game was saying he was really critical of Down. He'd watched them against Meath, and Meath had black cards and Down stayed in their shell and didn't come out to play. But I was talking to one of the Laois players, and he said, geez, that wasn't the Down team we played, because they weren't an overly defensive team at all. They're leaving 3 or 4 forwards up and working wing forwards. They put most of their kickouts out to midfield until they realised Laois were doing fairly well on them, and they're trying to flood the area that the long kickout is going out to. So there are a lot of positive tactics, that before I had spoken to somebody from Laois, I would have been going along with the Colin O'Rourke kind of thing. I'm not saying Colin was wrong, but I'm definitely thinking maybe Down might have had a bit of a wake-up call throughout the league.
Yeah, definitely. And Burns, you mentioned there, the keeper, he's had a fantastic season, and I think that's one of the reasons he won that game against Laois was his ability to make one-on-one saves. And I think obviously their free taker there, O'Hagan, he had it was 1-9 in that game. Quinn inside too is a handy player. So they have good positives going into the game. Well, and the Down teams that I know, and as I say, the last couple of games I've been at Park Esther, it's been real championship, old school kind of stuff. There's been a real white heat there, and even with teams playing a bit defensively, and that's what we're seeing now. There still is that bit more cut. We've seen that slow hand pass and people rotating off. Teams do press teams at different places around the pitch. And I think that's a thing for Down. They have to get about Donegal, not vice versa. Donegal have the ball players. They have better scoring forwards. They're going to control a lot of the ball. So where the Down tactically go at Donegal, they can't just let Donegal have the ball. They have to squeeze up in them. And I think that's what you see in McCavan at times. And Armagh did it to Donegal there recently in that league game. At different times, only they sat back. I think they could have won that match. They just went under their shell a bit. But at times they pushed up and engaged teams. And I think that is the real key, I think, to unsettling teams. Now, sure, if a team has got a better ability than you have to upset them in some way. So I think for Down to do that, they have to engage Donegal and try and get turnover ball, try and get in for a couple of goals. Because if it is just two teams playing similar, as we're saying, as much as we mentioned the Dubs earlier, Donegal's going to win the match. So the onus now is on Down at home to come up with not just a strategy, but a real bite. And I've seen that from Down teams in the past. Sure, they're down numbers, they've been written off. So surely they can just go and have a go, will they? And if they do play the tactics that they did, as you say, against Meath, they'll definitely be beat. But if they have a go like they did against Laois, they may as well go down fighting. And I think that is the mood around Down. Just go and have a go at Donegal. I'm sure as a player, what should they lose?
Yeah, and it used to be the case where the defensive tactics will be a leveller, where now is the defensive tactics aren't a leveller because the other team's too smart, and the good team will always beat the bad team if they're trying to be defensive. So they're trying to come out of that. Like I can't see how Down can win this game, Ger. Like I mean, Donegal have too many good players, they've too many big players, they've too many targets for their kickouts, too many scoring forwards. Down don't have enough scoring forwards. I understand Brendan's point of to knock Donegal off the game. I can't see how they're going to do it. Like for Donegal to put a stamp down this weekend and say we're all Ireland contenders, they need to give Down the type of beating. Now I understand Kerry are at home and Donegal are away, so there is a bit of a difference there. But they want to be. I think Donegal want to be making a statement this weekend.
No, definitely, and I think the defeat to Cavan last year will come up in conversation in Donegal's preparations, that they don't want to get caught cold like that again, and embarrassment, maybe that's too strong a word, mixed with disappointment from last year's defeat, I think will drive the Donegal players on. And I hope they come out with the blocks and play with that speed and intensity that I would associate with Donegal when they are moving the ball well, and they could win by 7 or 8 points fairly comfortably. And fully agree with Brendan that if Down decide to be cagey, play defensive and try and get them on the counter attack, as you've said as well, Willie, there's only going to be one winner over the 70-80 minutes. But I'd say Paddy Tally will have to let the lads just, off you go lads, give it a go. We'll keep one or two fellas at the back, but everyone else just gets stuck in now, and he might have to pull on the emotional heartstrings of players to get inside their heads to get the most out of them.
Yeah.
And if Donegal aren't ready for that, they will get caught. But I'd be very surprised after last year's defeat to Cavan if that happens again. If it does happen again, well then the management probably have to make a decision then that they brought the team as far as they can.
Oh, well, I would say the decision would be taken out of their hands if they don't beat Down this weekend. The other one is Kerry, Clare. Like, I mean, this is going to be one-sided. There's no point in saying anything else. If it was in Cusack Park, you give Clare a chance of making respect of it. In Killarney, lads, Kerry hold Killarney for championship. They're practically unbeatable in Killarney. They played their league games in Tralee. I remember a few years ago, it was almost the exact same narrative. I drove down, 2018, I think it was, and I drove the whole way down to Killarney. I was like, geez, Clare going fierce well in Division 2, you know, Kerry, want to see what they're like. Kerry scored 32 points. I think it was 32 points to 10. I went, what did I drive down? I was kicking myself. Yeah. So, like, I mean, Clare won't cope with Kerry. Like, I mean, they just won't this weekend. One thing Clare don't have is Gordon Kelly, and David Clifford has him down as the hardest man he's had to mark, and he's done well on Clifford. They don't have Gary Brennan, who was always able to battle in midfield, who Kerry kind of feared, and it looks like Jamie Malone is out. Like, I mean, for those reasons, away in Killarney, this, whatever the handicap is, I think Kerry will cover it. One chance that Clare do have, if they saw the Mayo game, Brendan, is they've Darren O'Neill, who must be 6'8". He was marking Aidan O'Shea in the first half, and Aidan O'Shea gave him a bit of a going over in fetching. But he got 2 goals. He was involved in 2 goals in the second half. Now, we know Kerry have a little bit of a problem with a high ball. Like, you know, do Clare go through their normal game plan, or do they just go, you know, rip up the script and go, here, do you know what we'll do? We'll just pepper a few balls in on him. I'd be very disappointed if he doesn't start full forward and he isn't peppered with a few.
Yeah, definitely. Well, again, it's up to Clare to come at something and try and unhinge Kerry. But you're right. It's going to be very interesting how Kerry play this game. Well, last year, I think they got bogged down, obviously, in the trying to be too tactical and just getting over the line against Cork and got caught with that late goal. It was a very un-Kerry-like performance. I think Kerry, of all the teams, have struggled to find the match between the modern football and the great football they used to play. Galway's probably the same. I think it rankles with them that they have to do this, and they know that this is part of the modern football. And I think getting that balance is huge. Now, I think Donegal are going to, as much as we'd love to see them playing brilliant football, are going to be very professional, if you want, in terms of how they're going to approach the down game. And I think Kerry could be the same. If they go like they were in the league, well, I think they were really flexing their muscles in the league, and the statement was coming in. I think for Peter Keane, it's going to be much more. They want to put their system in place that they're getting ready for bigger challenges. No disrespect to Clare, so I don't know how much they'll definitely blow them away. That could keep Clare in the game longer than we think. And as you say, that the old Route 1 style, how many players have a guy like that down the channel that can do that? But no one can handle that type of height, Willie. So you're looking at Clare maybe scoring 3 goals and not conceding for this to be a proper contest.
Yeah, it definitely. And everybody's talking about Kerry being Dublin's main contenders, and they are. And the noticeable thing now, how well they're playing. Tommy Walsh off the bench, Killian Spillane off the bench, Jack Barry off the bench, Micheál Burns off the bench, Jack Sherwood off the bench.
Yeah.
That's solid. Yeah. That's Dublin level of impacts coming off the bench.
Yeah, and even matching, again, we are looking down the line a bit, but being able to match the subs that the likes of Dublin are bringing in, and being aware on the sideline as a management that, okay, player X is coming in, we're going to throw in player Y now to pick them up. Because we've seen the damage that guy does when he comes in, which is Kevin McManaman example, which is...
Kerry were the first team that I saw doing that, when Kevin McManaman was I was at a game in Croke Park, can't remember who Kerry actually brought on, but the minute Kevin McManaman came on, Fitzmaurice brought on a fresh player, and it just seems so logical, but I hadn't seen that before.
It's very logical. Yeah. I'm surprised that it took so long for someone to cop onto it, but... I'm looking forward to, in a couple of years' time, not that we'll hear from Peter Keane, but maybe someone involved in the Cork Munster semi-final last year, to know what actually were the tactics for Kerry going into that game. They were a bit more defensive, but what was going on in their heads? Were they thinking ahead to playing against Dublin, that they wanted to be a bit more structured in their defence? And then fellas got so confused, and Brennan's touched on it as well. When you overcomplicate something which is for the Kerry players so simple for them to do, which is play football and attack, it gets in guys' heads, and then they're overthinking it, and then they don't know whether to go left or right or up or down, and then they're playing with fear as opposed to playing with a bit of fear. Is obviously good just to get you up for it, but so I think Kerry could whop Clare, personally speaking, regardless of whether the matches up in Ballybuffet, Ennis or Fitzgerald Stadium. They're going to whop them. Yeah,
I think we'll all agree on that. Sligo, Mayo, the other All-Ireland contenders, obviously. It's a wonder, are they All-Ireland contenders now? Killian O'Connor's confirmed he's out. James Horan was talking yesterday. He says Diarmuid O'Connor's very close, but Killian's out for the whole year. Not only is he out, which is a disaster because he's a physical presence, he's their scorer, Brendan. Now they might have to change things up. We were talking last week, maybe Aidan O'Shea might have to go in there. Now you're losing Aidan O'Shea from 11 or number 8 or 9, which is a bit of a disaster. Another factor is he's their free taker, and they don't have another very obvious free taker. Like Jason Doherty is the other one that jumps out at me. He's only coming back from injury, and he's not that dependable anyways as a free taker. After that, you're looking at Ryan Donoghue and Conor Loftus, Darren Cohen, who can't make the starting 15. It's like arguably Killian O'Connor is the one player that they couldn't lose.
Yeah, Doherty can kick it. There's a fellow there, Paul Toy, as well, but coming through that can kick. But you're right, none of them boys look comfortable, Willie. And it's one thing, it's funny, talking about free takers, the composure of Killian is unbelievable. Like he's ice cold, and he makes kind of your semi-awkward free just look so routine. And it's only now that he's out. I think that the weight of that has fallen, because a lot of people were asking about him in terms of being this, there's the debate about him being this top class player. I mean, what exactly does that mean when he contributes so much to Mayo? surely he has to be up there. And as I say, to have a go-to guy there, particularly in those big tight games, well, and as I say, you can see it from the demeanour of players a couple of times that Killian hasn't been on the pitch having to take frees. There's a nervousness, there's a panic that you just don't see in him. So if you can pop over those frees and keep the scoreboard ticking, that keeps you in games whether you're in or out or pushing a lead up or whatever. So that's massive for them now. And of course for Sligo, listen, McAtee was obviously a selector in Mayo, the Sligo manager, and there's another fella there in as well, Keane, I think he's involved with Mayo as well. So they certainly know Mayo, but I mean that's a massive ask for Sligo, who didn't have the best of seasons.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I think we'll all agree Sligo are going to come up short, or Mayo, could win that handily enough. The other big one in Leinster is Offaly and Louth, Ger. We've talked a good bit about Offaly. Like, we don't know whether the team will be demoralised after losing the league final, or they'll be out to be so motivated to prove that they're better than that. Well, that's the hindsight analysis you get on Monday. You know what I mean? That's questions just practically impossible to answer right now.
Yeah, and John Maughan, Offaly manager, has been around the block enough to know how to manipulate and motivate players' mindsets and again trying to get into their heads. And look, I was involved with Carlo last year in the Leinster Championship against Offaly. We lost to them by a point. That same Offaly team, playing a similar way but playing it better, got obviously promoted from Division 3 to Division 2, but there was obviously a split with the regionalisation in terms of probably quality overall, because Derry were so far ahead of everyone else that they gave out a big hide into Offaly. But for me, having been on the sideline recently versus Louth in the Division 4 promotional game, Louth, I would fancy Louth against Offaly. I think overall they are actually quite developed athletically,
right,
and physically. And while I knew they had certain qualities in preparing for the game, I was taken aback and
at their conditioning
and their mobility in the middle eight, which Carlo just struggled to get the grips with. Now we got a bit of a hold in the second half, but still we lost by 8 points, which was a fair reflection.
We were down 8 at half time, and then it was a draw in the second half. It was like, I was reading the report from that. It's like Kieran Byrne got 3 in the first half. Mulroy, who we'd mentioned, Conor Grimes scored 1-2. He's a great target man. So they have a nice kind of blend.
They've a lovely blend. They've a lovely system. All of those, they're two midfielders, Mulroy, Grimes. I can't think of the centre back's name now, but they're all 6'2", 6'3", and they're all lean, mean machines, and they're decent footballers too, and they're able to get around the park. And I think that will cause Offaly. They will have more mobility than Offaly in that part of the field. And if they can play to the same level that they played, that Louth played against Carlo, I would find it hard to see any other winner except for Louth. But
okay.
Anyway.
Brendan, what about you? This is the first one where it's a bit of a 50-50. I'm not sure who to go for. I nearly take Ger's opinion on having seen Louth up front, because I wasn't impressed with Offaly at all last weekend. So I'll lean on the Louth side myself here. What do you think?
Yeah, same as Willie, and the vibes coming out of Louth are, the players are absolutely loving Hart's tenure there. I know Gavin Devlin's in them, but they're saying that the boys are just buzzing at training. And funny, Jerry, you mentioned the middle eight. That was a phrase that came out of Tyrone in Hart's time. No, the middle eight, one in the middle eight.
Middle third it started at, did it?
Yeah, Hart definitely has the magic. Having met him a few times, he has a serious presence, and I know at the end, it was a clamour for him to leave Tyrone, and you see it's a tough job there. The two lads have come in, obviously Logan and Dooher, and it's been a tough start for them. But Hart's ability and his experience, and he came down to speak to us at the club here one time, and the man had some presence. I remember thinking to myself at the time, however Tyrone do in the championship, he'll have them at their best. That's the impression he left in me, and he just has something about him. So sometimes that can have a huge galvanising effect on a county and bringing them on. So I think the Hart factor would tip me towards Louth in this game, and sets up, I suppose, a game against Kildare. Then that's either of these teams, I suppose you said, well, are going to be nip and tuck. Can they elevate to the level to maybe cause an upset and take Clare out of the Leinster Championship.
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt they potentially could. So we'll all go for loud on that one. Carla Longford, I'm not going to ask you for a tip on this, Ger. I'm sure you've done your homework on Longford. Like, I mean, they have a strong team. You know, Fox, excellent. Mullinaghda, you have Mickey Quinn, you have Darren Gallagher in midfield, who's very good. Then obviously Robbie Smith and Rian Brady, who's a lovely, tasty left-footed. Like, they can cause Desi Reynolds, who was wearing number 7. I think he played wing forward the last day. He got 1-2. Like, they're a good team. But Pádraig Davis came out after the league and he was very honest. I was impressed with him. He says, we're a Division 3 team. Yeah. And we're not getting above ourselves or below ourselves, but we're a solid Division 3 team. So in a way for Carla, this is a perfect test against a team that's beatable in a division that you're aspiring to get to.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's something we've kind of touched upon with the players. This is where we want to get to, and you're playing against a very seasoned Division 3 team in Longford who yo-yo up and down, but Division 3 is where they're at. And they have a lot of seasoned players. I've played against a lot of the Longford guys with St Vincent's when we played Mullinaghda in a club semi-final a couple of years ago, and they obviously went on to beat Kilmacud Crokes a season or two later in the Leinster final. So those lads have an awful lot of talent. But no, they obviously played Tip in the relegation game to stay up in Division 3. And
very impressive, that
very impressive. Well, but they actually had a bit between their teeth. They played like they wanted it more. And this despite shipping a bit of a hiding against Cavan in the regular league, Longford, when they needed to turn it on and represent the county with pride, they did it quite well. And the flip side then is obviously the involvement with Carlo. I suppose for us as a management crew, we got involved just before the last league game last year, and we won championship match, and then we obviously have them for a couple of months now. So in a very short amount of time, maybe 4 months, we're as a management group delighted with the progress that the lads have made, trying to iron out a couple of maybe inconsistencies, maybe week to week or session to session with players, and obviously strengthen the squad and develop them athletically. So it'll be a big challenge for the Carlo guys, and they lost to Longford 2 years ago in the championship, lost by a good few scores. So hopefully that bit of hurt will be in the system, because a lot of the same players will be playing and that they can turn it around. But I'd be confident that the Carlo fellas will represent themselves with pride, and hopefully we can just push Longford to the edge and sneak through by a couple of points.
Yeah. So I'm not going to get a prediction off you on that, Ger, and I'm not going to get, out of respect, I'm not even going to give a prediction. So the last one then is Wicklow and Wexford. This is in Ockram at 3 o'clock, or two pretty evenly matched teams. I thought it was interesting that Wicklow have Nicky Devereux, who transferred this year. He played Dublin up until 2014. His brother Davy and Oisin Manning from St Jude's. So like they have the few imports. They're obviously coming off that brilliant result against Carlow. Wexford are coming off a good result against Sligo, but you'd probably have to fancy Wicklow at home, the new import, a good young manager, and the confidence of coming off the Cavan result.
It's a great opportunity for Wicklow, and look, unfortunately for Wicklow and Wexford, the carrot for winning this game is a home match to Dublin, and whatever way you want to dress it up, there's only going to be one winner there. But Davy Burke as Wicklow manager at the outset of the year, you're looking to stay in Division 3, to relegate the Ulster champions and staying in Division 3. And to get a win over Wexford again in the championship, because I think they played them in their last league game last year to get promoted from Division 4 to 3, and then they had them a week or two later
and beat them again
in championship. Is it Wexford's turn to win? They are evenly matched teams, but I'm very familiar with a lot of the Wicklow guys. The Devereux's dad, I think he's from Wicklow actually, funny enough, and so I'm sure he's as proud as he was to see Nicky represent Dublin in Croke Park and win an All-Ireland 2011, 13, and that by being involved. I'm sure he's really proud to see him representing the county where he grew up in. So that's another element that goes on in the background. But I don't know how to call this one, and I think Wicklow will just have too much experience now after playing a lot of Division 3 games, and the confidence that they'll take from getting over the Wexford game. I think they'll take that into this match this weekend. But at the same time, sometimes when the motivation is and the aim of your season, Wooly, is to let's stay and become a mainstay in Division 3, when that's achieved, there's an element
And switch
you
off.
switch off,
Right.
which Division 3-4 happens. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
Might switch off. It's actually not the last game. Limerick Waterford are. But we'll probably both be going for Limerick here, and we'll probably talk about Limerick a little bit more in the next round. No disrespect to Waterford, we fancy Limerick in the Gaelic rounds. Right, lads, we'll have to leave it there. Brendan, we didn't get much from you in those last two games because let's be honest, Jared's more of an expert on Carlow football than you are. Sorry.
True, yeah.
Right, we'll be back.
I've full faith in you, Jared. I've full faith in you, my man.
We'll be back on Monday. We'll review all the weekend's championship action. So we'll talk to you all then. Good luck.